Welcome back, Camden Catholic. Welcome back, Honors, to your very last content-based flip of the year. You guys made it. It's insane. We got finals on Tuesday. You're going to do great. I have complete faith in you. And like I talked about it with the other classes, start big, work your way smaller. Don't freak yourself out. These are tests that are meant to be taken and for you to do well on, all right? But this is going to be it, okay? Because we're getting to the end of World War I. It's aftermath. And if we have time, we might get into a little something on Friday because I just like it a lot. And we'll talk about it then. But let's get into it. So what we are now in, the last time we left off, we were talking about how, like, Russia's dropping out of the war because they're in the middle of a communist revolution. We're in a total warfare kind of a situation. We've got the Western Front blowing up. It's a stalemate. It's and America still remains uninvolved, right? Well, we are now in what is known as a total war, right? When you put an entire country's focus into resources into the war effort, right? So what I mean by that is every single industry no longer makes industrious items for profit anymore. Capitalism still runs the table in all of Europe, right? You've got Henry Ford actually, instead of, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. But let's say hypothetically you have an English car company, like Rolls-Royce, right? So Rolls-Royce stopped making vehicles during World War I and actually switched to making heavy machinery for the war effort. Plane engines, cars for the actual war effort, tank engines, things like that, right? So total war is when you put your country's entire focus and its resources into that war effort, right? So you're focusing on winning the war, and industry must catch up and supply those things. You make t-shirts? Not anymore. You make uniforms, right? You make canned food? Not anymore. You make rations, right? So many countries are also going to use this thing called conscription. Now, this is going to come in later towards the end of the war, so put a little sub-note for that. This begins later towards the end of the war. Conscription, also known as the draft, where people are made to go fight in a war. You're not asked to go fight in this war anymore, right? So a draft is basically your number gets called and you must go and enlist, right? War is also very expensive. So taxes are going to go up and rationing is going to become a thing. Taxes go up so they can provide money for the war effort, and rationing is going to occur so that they can take a lot of their resources and funnel them to the war effort to send to the soldiers, right? So, for example, you were only allowed to eat certain amounts of meat or certain amounts of canned goods. Rationing was a big thing. You were actually given a ration card that you actually turned in at the grocery store so you could actually have a certain amount of things tracked by the government at all times. All right, so then we're going to get into it some more. And then also, here's the big problem. We're in a stalemate. People are just banging off, bam, 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 just like can't seem to win. So I know Jada Hamilton asked a great question in the class yesterday. She's like, so how do you win this war? How do you possibly win a stalemated war? Well, one way you can do it is by choking the life out of your enemy, right? Using a blockade, all right? So the way you're going to end up having to win this war is using a blockade, which is to prevent using ships to keep goods from being carried in and out of other countries. Do I have chalk? Yeah, I do. So let's talk about the blockade that was actually used in World War I, right? So two different blockades were actually set up in World War I. So we have Europe right here, right? So the first blockade was actually set up right there at the border of this border of Great Britain all the way over to Sweden, right? And this was to prevent goods from coming in to get towards the German Empire, which is right there. Then there was another blockade set up using submarines around Britain to try and prevent goods from going from in or out of Britain. Now, here's the problem, though. We were actually secretly sneaking goods to the British the entire time, but we're not going to talk about that yet because they were all snuck on this little boat called Lusitania. Now, the British are going to set up a blockade against the Germans north of their country to prevent these things from coming in. And then the Germans are going to set up a submarine blockade around Britain, and something's going to happen. I need you to write something down next to it. It's called unrestricted submarine warfare. It's very, very important, all right? So, drop it. There you are. Dude, I need your help. Oh, damn it. You cussed in it. I said, damn it. That's why I clapped. Welcome back. Sorry about that. Mr. Kettleberger doesn't know how to operate AirPlay on a MacBook, so I had to go step away and actually figure that out, which, ironically enough, is really sad and Pathetic. All right, so anyway, so we also had another really, really good conference. So we were talking about blockades and stuff. And I said you need to write something down really quick. The thing you need to write down is this thing called unrestricted submarine warfare, all right? So underneath this right here, unrestricted submarine warfare. What it is when the Germans would actually seek to sink, destroy, or bring down any boat that tried to pass through their blockade, right? Now, this whole concept hinges around the fact that that means not only military vessels, but as well as civilian ones, fishing boats, cruise liners, things like that. We'll see how this kind of flares up in their face here in a little bit. Also, somebody else asked a really good question, too. So wait a minute, are blockades illegal now because of the rules of warfare that actually followed World War I because it was so severe and so brutal? So, fun fact, did some research. Blockades are technically illegal unless it's in your own territory for defense purposes. You are no longer allowed to use a blockade the way that the Brits did against the Germans, right? But also, getting into it, we also had a massive resurgence about the spreading of propaganda and ideas, right? Spreading of ideas to promote a cause. So, propaganda is all about the idea on trying to promote your cause in a glamorous and secure way to try and encourage the war effort to continue, right? Now, propaganda is going to encourage men to fight and join their army. It's also going to promote rationing, which is when citizens are going to be living scarcely so that soldiers can have more, right? So, for example, you got this one. Be patriotic. Sign your country's pledge to save food, right? You got this one as well. Destroy this mad brute. Enlist, right? As you can see right here, this is making a play off of King Kong, which was a very, very popular film at the time, a silent movie when it originally came out. And the King Kong monster is actually German militarism, right? And he's saying, culture he's going to beat us up with. And this, of course, is the Statue of Liberty. He's coming to take our innocence. It's ridiculous. And then Dig for Victory. This is one of my favorite things. These are called victory gardens, right? These were big in the U.S., actually, when we got into the war. So victory gardens were actually made so you would grow your own vegetables at home so that vegetables could actually be sent to the front into the war effort, right? Very, very cool stuff. Then you're also going to see this as well. The war is going to be extremely hard on the people that fight it, right? Because morale is going to begin to plummet. As the war progresses in around 1916 to 1917, morale is a group's efforts towards a war, or a group's feelings toward a war, right? So everything's going to begin to plummet. Now, morale is going to collapse for civilians and armies, and Germans are going to begin to send 15-year-old recruits to the front lines because they are running out of soldiers, right? So England is almost bankrupt. The stalemate, food shortages, failures in battle are going to lead citizens to hating this war on both sides, right? This is going to give an example of this underneath. The blockade by the British was causing hunger riots in Germany. You need to jot that down underneath this right here. Hunger riots were actually breaking out in Germany because people back in Germany were starving to death because the Brits were preventing food and supplies from coming to them, right? So they were trying to attack not the German soldiers, but German citizens, right? So to try and prevent them from supporting the war effort anymore, right? So things are absolutely abysmal right now. Food shortages and low morale are even going to lead to a communist revolution in Russia in 1917 that's going to force them to withdraw from the entire war. So with Russia out of the picture, Germany believes that they have the ability to win this war on the Western Front, right? So Germany is going to then take all in 1918, when the Russians officially surrender, okay, the Germans take their entire military force and throw them over onto the Western Front, right? Trying to knock out the French as fast as possible. Because the Germans are also highly aware that it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of time until it's a matter of time, it's a matter of time until the Americans get involved. So the Germans had the idea that they were going to try and focus their entire force on the Western Front so they could try and knock Britain and France out and get them to surrender before the Americans ever got involved, right? So, and this is really, really crazy. Look at these numbers. This right here is World War I military deaths in the Entente power. So this is the Allies, right? As you can see, 1 out of every 3 soldiers that died as an ally was a Russian soldier. The French took heavy losses as well, so did the Brits, the Italians, but look at us right here, 2%, right? Very, very small because we didn't get involved until much, much later. And then we've got this stuff, right? The U.S. entrance into the war, right? So we're going to finish this slide up, and then we're going to finish the rest of this presentation in class tomorrow, right? Yeah. Yep, we're going to finish the rest of this thing in class tomorrow. Or are we? How long am I doing this? Nah, we're going to keep going. All right, so now, the U.S. entrance into the war is going to be massively disputed, right? Because the current president at the time was Woodrow Wilson, the New Jersey man, right? Even though, ironically enough, he's from Kansas, I think, and he's pretty racist. Now, anyway, so Woodrow Wilson is the current U.S. president when the war is going on. When he actually gets elected the very, very first time, his campaign was they kept us out of the war, right? So, getting into this, though, he is going to denounce Germany after they sank a very, very large cruise liner. Jake, do you remember what the cruise liner is that the Germans sank, getting us to get pissed off at them?
Oh.
Starts with the L.
Wait, that's again.
The Germans sank a boat going into World War I.
I know that, too.
What's the boat called? Starts with the L.
I know that, I do.
What's it called?
Is that some...
He's
hiding.
Lusa what? Lusitania, man. Get it together. All right, so now, anyway, so he's going to denounce...
I remember from last year.
There you go. So he's going to denounce Germany after they sank a cruise liner known as the Lusitania, right? Killing 1,200 people and 128 of them are Americans. That's a cruise boat, so these are just civilians, right? And they're going to keep using these aggressive tactics, right? Well, immediately Woodrow Wilson says, you must stop this unrestricted submarine warfare. And so the Germans agree to it for a certain amount of time, right? The passenger boat also may or may not have been delivering military supplies to the Allies. So we might have been cheating a little bit, right? So anyway, but this is actually a major event leading into the start of World War I. However, you do need to jot this down. The Americans did not enter the war immediately after this happened. We actually waited and stalled out for quite some time before we actually would ever get involved, right? And that, of course, is Woodrow Wilson right there. So the U.S.'s legit entrance actually comes in with the thing called the Zimmermann telegram, right? So Arthur Zimmermann, the German ambassador, apparently sent a telegram message to Mexico telling them to attack the U.S. to reconquer land in the United States that had been taken from them in the Mexican-American Wars, right? That's messed up. Now, it was intercepted by the Brits, so there's a big conspiracy theory about this telegram, actually, that says a lot of people say that the Brits actually made it up, and they actually sent it to the Americans on purpose, saying they intercepted it to try and force our hand into getting in, right? Also, it's because the Germans then reignited that unrestricted submarine warfare, started sinking boats randomly again, and so Wilson and the U.S. just like Darius was back in the day. And we are going to declare war on Germany in April of 1917. We're going to begin to mobilize our military, right? So then we'll get into the rest of this stuff tomorrow, but we're going to wrap it up right there, all right? So I'll see you guys later. Have a great evening. It's been real. I've really, really enjoyed this year. You may have a flip tomorrow if we don't get through the stuff in class, but I really anticipate us actually wrapping this whole bad boy up. So I will see you guys then. Have a great one.